So we do. We have an interesting panel today. Clearly, we don't have a lot of time to be able to cover everything in relation to the differences between hiring people in the US and Europe, but we will try and give you a little bit of a taste. We will touch on some of the cultural differences and challenges that comes with that when it comes to various different things like the benefits provisions, maybe global management of employees as well. We do have a couple of legal minds, as Heidi mentioned, so we're going to make the most of having them on the panel with us today as well, where we can talk about some of the legalities of people in the US. Now, when I'm talking about US, generally North America, because we know there's a lot of companies with teams in Canada as well as the US, so there are differences with both of those as well. So we'll try and highlight some of that today too. But so on the panel, obviously Heidi did introduce, we do have a number of people that have different experience when working with either the US or with Canada, so we'll try and draw that out. But to get us started, a lot of today has been about culture, so we're going to start with that. When it comes to your experience, Michela, of working, you work with a US organisation as well as having some of your team in the US. What's been your biggest cultural hurdle so far?
So being the only HR person on the panel, right, I'm going to talk to you frankly as an HR person here. It's not been easy. Fiona, we've spoken also separately as a sort of on the HR forums. Bringing together cultures is never easy. What I feel I wasn't prepared for is how there's a number of things which are stacked against us from the get-go. Time zone, distance, and if similar to maybe our story, we went through quite a large M&A during COVID. We couldn't even get together in the same room, right? So we're dealing with situations where my boss is in Vancouver, my direct reports are in Vancouver, so we have a 9-hour time difference. So I'll start by talking about how the odds are not in your favor if we want to go Hunger Games route. You do have to work actively to bridge those just quite large divides. And in our case, we were talking about teams who were already there, already established, partner quite heavily with people who are on the ground and who can share what it means to employ people in US, what it means to have people in California versus in New Jersey. Maybe that's sort of one of the biggest headaches we had in the very beginning. You also need to partner quite heavily with your legal colleagues. I mean, the partnership between HR and legal is always one which is healthy and which is you know, helpful for us. But let alone in a place where you think you're dealing with one country and then you're dealing with provinces, BC versus Ontario, you're then dealing with state-by-state laws, you're then dealing with the regulator. If you guys have experience with the regulator, we also have a situation, which I thought was only in Malta, where you get asked a list of things and then you get told, no, that's not it. There's another 6 that we just thought of. So I won't take up time from my colleagues, but it is something that you need to actively work towards from day one.
So we're gonna come back to the different states and the different provinces. That's a whole conversation that we can have just on that. But back to the cultural piece. So Luis, if we hear about a lot when it comes to the US, they live to work, whereas maybe Europe is a bit more work to live. How do you think that impacts when you have a European employee reporting into a US or a Canadian manager? And maybe some of the benefits and challenges that they find there.
I think that one thing that describes the US market, it's aggressivity. It's very aggressive because they're always changing from one place to another. Personally, I'm a fan of that kind of market approach because you will always need to be competitive. If you're not, you just leave. In Europe, we have a way more protective way of looking at labor law. So yes, maybe for an European employee that is reporting to someone in the US, in the first times it will be strange because you will be always demanding more and saying if you are not fit to the job, just someone else will come to do it. So right now we are going through that kind of, let's call it growing or growth pain. But I'm confident that in, I don't know, some years, some months, the Europeans will start to get used to the US, and I hope that the US approach will come to Europe. I think it will be something very positive. But apart from that, you have the other problems that were mentioned about time zones, more practical stuff, which is a good thing as being a lawyer, because I'm able to go through the wonderful licensing processes for actually working and then the employment problems. This said, I'm a big fan of the employment laws in the US, because they are, in general, of course, depending from state to state, but way more simple than in Europe, straightforward. And I think this is a very good thing.
Okay. Not sure that the room would agree when it comes to some of the benefits. Maybe sure we have some. I'm sorry, sure we have some Swedes in the room. Maternity leave. Just going to put it out there clearly. Very, very different opinions. How, Ros, do you want to take that one? Add some insight, and I'm happy to get some input from the others as well. How's that going to work when there's an employee in Sweden that says, I want to take the next year off to a US manager?
Well, I think it's not only just between Europe and the US. I also find it a lot even between European countries themselves. Yeah. Because even though you have, for example, in Europe, the EU directives, which tend to give a base, because it's a directive, it means that everyone can do whatever they want outside that minimum. One of the biggest questions I get from HR is, Ros, could you somehow put a handbook together for all the companies around the world, and the kind of the one thing for everyone? The simple answer is no.
Send it to me. Send it to me afterwards.
No, or it's going to be super expensive. So what I always suggest is you can have perhaps some policies which are common, your values, for example, the fact that you're going to have equality, no discrimination, the principles. I'm okay with that. But when you come to me and tell me, we want everyone getting the same maternity, everyone getting the same parental, it's really, really difficult. The best, if you really insist on doing it, the only way you can do it is have a study of all the countries that you are in, see which is the most favorable, and apply it across the board. But being a lawyer, I tend to stand more on the employer side. I hope there are no unions in here. But
they're not allowed.
They're not allowed, okay. You have to be very careful, because the moment you start giving, or the moment you give, just like in a relationship, right? Your boyfriend gets used to giving him a lot, and the moment you start taking back, he doesn't like it. And it's the same with employers and employees. So I personally prefer the cautious route. I can see the idea of having, principles which are similar. Mm-hmm. And again, if, for example, in the States we have the at-will employment, where basically it's hire and fire very easily, nothing stops you from being a more protective employer. But then you cannot call your lawyer and say, for this case, I want to apply something a bit quicker. Can you get rid of him quickly for me? No, because once you set it, and especially when you put things in writing, I know you all love these beautiful handbooks, and we make lots of money when we draft them, don't get me wrong. But the more you say, the more you can't take back. So, very important, because I'm here talking to all of you, so I want to take this opportunity. I don't want to discourage you from putting something ideal for everyone. But you are going, when it comes to entitlements, especially you mentioned maternity, parental, annual leave, those kind of entitlements, in my humble opinion, maybe my colleague will disagree with me, stick to the country. Okay? Because otherwise, even in terms of payments and payroll issues you're going to create more burden. Because, for example, in Malta, you can get the money from the maternity fund. In England, they have the statutory maternity pay, which is worked out completely different. And you're just going to make a lot of complications. And then keep your lawyers out of it. I'm getting us out of a job now. I'm going to make ourselves redundant.
We're still going to get into the legal side. So coming back to then, so Luis, you can help on this one. So then US, we just obviously touched on each country is different. Each state in the US is different, and each province in Canada is different. So for something like annual leave, obviously if you do have people in every state in the US, do you want to try and have different leave allowances, but also different provisions of, it's up front, it's got to be accrued, and how it's all applied? Or can you try and have one federal approach?
Always depends on the workforce that you have available for that. Because if you have one lawyer or two, it's not going to be easy to do it. If you are able to, even if outsourcing, have a lawyer in each state, maybe you can do it. Personally, I would prefer, let's say, symmetric approach to all employees. Also because I'm a fan of the remote work. This means that in the US, it's a way of fighting the multi-state complications that you face. Setting an office, I don't know, somewhere, maybe in Delaware, I don't know, and then employing remotely. And then you can probably set up rules that apply for everyone.
Yeah.
Or even if you don't, there will be no problem because they are remotely working, so you can adjust. But again, depends on the workforce you have, speaking of lawyers, and also in the amount of employees that you have. So there's no black and white in this answer. Sorry.
He's being a lawyer, isn't he?
Also, if there was a black and white answer, I will probably not have a job. So I'll just stick with this one.
Is that the answer that you get from your lawyers as well, Michela?
Yes.
You have very good lawyers.
So, okay, so Michela, what approach, let's try and learn obviously from what you have done, because again, that might help some of the people in the room. What approach have you taken when it comes to things like leave and some of the other benefits that we've spoken about, or handbooks or any of those types of things?
Yeah,
What can you share?
We've been very open about, and obviously working with knowledge workers, you're dealing with populations who are, well-researched, well-read, so they understand the concept of European laws being separate to US laws, to Canada laws, etc. We do have the extremes, let's say. We have the Nordic countries in our network. We have the Nordic countries, and we have the US. So suddenly we need to apply an element of emotional intelligence or cultural intelligence that we saw spoken about earlier. But we are applying this also to our workforce. So we are applying the concept of don't judge your colleague from the UK who's out, or from Sweden who's out on 2 weeks of leave in summer when you are lucky to get 2 weeks of leave in your entire employ. So we're trying to apply a local respect towards the way things are done. Without necessarily, but this is my personal values aligning with that of the company, without necessarily letting people sit in benefits which aren't, let's say, as beneficial or as nice as we would like them. So if there is a way that we can stretch across certain policies from Europe to the US and Canada, let's do it. We recently went through quite an exercise to stretch our volunteering policy across from Europe to the US, where people can exchange their PTO in the US or their leave in Europe to carry out volunteering work. And it was a struggle. It was a struggle for people to understand the concept of this is the way we do it. Why don't you think about it? Why don't you try? Sorry, Rosa, I saw you wanted to mention.
No, because I think what is also a good idea, Mick, is even if you don't manage to put everything the same, you could also, if, for example, there's an entitlement in a particular country which is not in another country, for example, one that comes to mind, in England, for example, they have bereavement leave when a parent loses a child. Okay, something which I really like, and I've been trying to push as well here. So imagine that entitlement doesn't exist in other countries, but it's a really thoughtful and good entitlement to have. So a very good way of looking at it, because I like to be positive, is maybe you can try and see what is sexy, so to speak, or what is good in the countries, and then you just adopt it to the others. So that is also another way which I like. You take not necessarily you take the best and put the best all in one pot, because that could be expensive and it could be unmanageable. But you can take things which maybe don't exist and add them. So I also like that creative approach. I mean, again, and having said that, you can be creative in your own jurisdiction, because sometimes clients, especially when we are drafting handbooks, it's not the first time that a client says, I want to be more generous than the law. And I am not against it. What is very important is that there is a cost analysis to it. Because sometimes it's very easy to say, yes, I'm going to give, more of this and more of that. But if there isn't a cost analysis to it, then, as I said, you can't take it back. if I may, just another thing, I think also HR, I know it's very difficult because I find it difficult practicing in 2 countries, let alone knowing all the laws of all the countries in the world. But if you are limited to a number of companies, I would advise you to get trained, even just a short employment law course, you know. I find HR people who study employment law, I love them because it makes my life easier and you challenge me, you know, and that is good with your lawyer. You need to challenge your lawyer, you know, and then we bill you even more. So be careful.
There's a theme kind of building here. So, Luis, so internal, so not talking about billing more.
Fortunately.
Oh, okay. Now, you sit across, obviously, legal and HR as well, you mentioned. And when we were talking, you said that you were setting up a team in the US.
Yes.
So where are you at with that process? And again, you know, kind of what are some of the learnings from that you can share?
I could say we are really in the early beginnings, so we are still studying the best approach to do. But going back to what I said in the beginning, it's a very aggressive market. That has positive and negative things from the hiring point of view. I think it will be easy to hire someone there or to find someone that meets the requirements we need, which is key when you are on the HR side of this. But then you have the same problem because retention, I think the turnover will be way bigger than what we are used to here in Europe. So this is a challenge.
Why do you think that?
Because we don't have that much turnover. We have offices in Portugal, in Malta, in many locations in Portugal. Of course, there is a turnover, but from what we have been seeing, it's way lower than in the US. And after you hire someone, you start to like its work, you want him to stay. So when he leaves, you're going to be sad, and you have to face that. I think that will be the biggest challenge we will have there. So here in Europe, I think it's very difficult to hire. In the US, I think it's very difficult to retain and keep going. But let's see. Hopefully we can build a great team there and have people with us forever because we love our employees and we want to have them for as long as we can.
True. Let's hope. Good luck with that. Keep us posted.
Thanks.
So, Michela, coming back to you again from some of the challenges that you've talked about. So on the people side of things and the building relationships and obviously the cultural differences, hearing from Viviana earlier, what have you seen on that side and what learnings or maybe things you've taken or implemented to address some of that building relationships? We heard it again a little bit, kind of time is money and, in some of those conversations. Do you find that there are different approaches to building relationships from, one side of the world to the other?
Yes, there are definitely differences. We used to feel it as well because we have quite a strong presence in Asia. We were already feeling the differences that you get between Europe and Asia. So it was almost a lift and shift of the cultural, let's say, humility or the cultural respect that you show when you're present in a country that you don't understand not even this much about in the beginning. When you tell me Hong Kong, when you tell me the Philippines, it was very alien sort of to me. So we approached that same model for the US, but we're also, again, part of our model is also to make sure that we have feet on the ground who are both senior and junior. So the senior people we found are the ones helping us with the strategy, with the dealing with the key stakeholders, the senior stakeholders, and the junior people often, probably most of you will be nodding at your heads at this, are the ones with the finger on the pulse of our employees are saying this, our employees are saying that, this was received well, this comms wasn't received well. I mean, basic trip-ups, guys, that we're talking about are using English spelling on Americanized comms. So these are the learnings that you go through then when you receive feedback from your employees telling you, let's think about how to tweak this, let's think about how better to address our population. I mean, with any good marketing strategy, you want to make sure that what you're sending out is being received well, and that's similar to HR. So I wanted to pick up on a piece that Luis mentioned in the case of the sort of the hiring or retention concerns that we're seeing in the US, because it's funny that I have a completely different experience to date. In that we have quite a few of the large tech giants in the US who are making large-scale redundancies. DocuSign just announced overnight. So suddenly you have an element of nervousness of tech staff to not go out there and sort of look too much to a role which might be a bit either less stable, or there's this sort of threat of recession going on a lot more in the US than it is in Europe. So suddenly we have this case, we have employees in London, we have this case where the financial district is going all out and going higher, increase salaries, go for inflation, etc. And in the US we have a little bit more stability. So it's interesting that there's also this difference in let's say macroeconomics going on, which we have to deal with ultimately on the supply chain side of things from a people perspective.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm mindful of time as well. There was one thing, Ros, you mentioned earlier about at-will employment. Now, if anyone hasn't actually worked with the US, you may not know what that means. So I think maybe can you just cover off the difference between at-will employment and an employment contract?
No, basically the main difference when you have an employment relationship, for example, in Malta, the contractual relationship, as you know, once you sign that contract, not only when you sign the contract, actually sometimes we don't even have a contract, but there's a verbal contract, but you should have a contract in place because there's another law which tells you what you need to have in place. But then there are procedures which need to be followed. Whilst in the, Louise, here maybe you can help me a bit more because I'm not a US expert, but at will is basically, it's at will. So anyone can tell you, that's it, time's up. So there isn't that protection and that binding effect. One other thing I just wanted to take the opportunity to say as well, I find it very useful if, for example, you implement a lot of diversity and inclusion training. And sometimes, because we were saying how the Swedes feel that they have more and then the others feel that they have less. I'm a big believer that when you actually say it out loud, everyone relaxes more. Because sometimes we maybe think that employees, isn't it obvious that these have more rights than us? Maybe what's obvious for us is not obvious for the employees. And I'm talking from experience in another part of my life when I was in an organization and it was very clear there was preferential treatment which was being made. And I could see why it was being made, because I'm smart enough and I could see why. But had they told me in my face, at the moment, we can't push you, but we can push someone else for these reasons, if it was said, I would have felt better. So wearing this hat, I'm sharing with you, sometimes it's good to go out there and tell the employees, listen, this is the situation we have. We have different laws in different countries. These are the benefits which are in these countries. But having said that, maybe in this country there's this benefit, and in this country there is something else which this other country doesn't have. And sometimes when you say things out loud and you train your employees, I think everyone will be more at peace. And they themselves could then come up with ideas as to how there could be more more joint community as to how they work forward. So again, the importance of, as HR, I mean, if I am an HR professional, I think I am in a way. So I'd love to be an HR professional, actually. So if I'm an HR professional, two things I would definitely do is get some training on the laws and definitely stay updated. Because I think us lawyers, the pain of our job is we constantly have to stay updated. I know you can call your lawyer, but it's good that you yourself stay updated. And then another thing I would definitely do is make sure that you train your employees. So that is very, very important, diversity and inclusion. And again, we're talking about different states, different countries. These issues are happening even in local companies where we're getting people from all over the world working in one same company. So
exactly, that one's not even US related.
We're still running out of time.
We are. Right, so I'm going to go to each of you. That may be your advice, Ros, so we'll go to the other two first and then come back to you if you've got a last piece. So just one piece, your top piece of advice for anyone who's in this room and going to be setting up a team in North America or possibly an entity either. Michela first.
I mean, the most, let's say, powerful phrase that I can give you at this point is to be humble when you're going through these sorts of situations, and apply, in being humble, apply the level of sort of cultural awareness that we were just hearing about. But that's what I came up with now.
And Luis, what's your one piece of advice?
Not that my job is on the line because of that, but I would say that both the people or HR and legal need to be very close in this approach. And as Roselyn said, the HR people need to be aware of the laws, or have a little knowledge about that. Because since you're entering a new market, I know you're already there for a while, but in our case, we're entering, first steps are critical. So if you mess up now, then you'll have to solve it. My advice is be careful.
Be humble, be careful.
Totally.
Wow.
Be
Anything that you want to add to that as well, Ros? Now that we've
I
just
think the
scared
last
everyone
thing
in the
I'm
room.
going to say, because obviously being in this market, I deal with employment law every day, and I hope we won't see a lot of redundancies, okay? I hope. But if we do, we need to get ready very well. You need to understand the redundancy laws very well. Because what happens is we get panic, okay? Recently I was working on a project, client called, we had to do everything literally in 24 hours. And you can't do everything in 24 hours, okay? So again, as much as I would like to see HR prepared for the attraction, the recruitment, the contracts of employment, the handbook, unfortunately you have to equip yourself for the shitty times. Okay? And you have to equip yourself for the shitty times. I won't get sued for saying this, right? No. Okay.
Maybe in the US.
The US, yeah. From now, you need to know your stuff from now, because when you're asked, your CEO calls you, you need to have a bit of an idea, you know, as to what is going to be expected in terms of time frames and in terms of what you're going to owe in terms of financial packages to your employees. Okay? I sorry I ended on a negative note, but I want to...
Just a little piece of advice about this. Don't think that employees are dumps, because as I said, you need to be ready for the shit that is coming. And some employees are very smart. So we need to look at them as smart people, at least as smart as we do, and respect them with that to avoid the shit.
Right.
Are we live?
maybe recorded.
Right. In summary, we've now all been scared. We're going to have to pay lots of legal fees. Just kidding. So, yes, clearly when it comes to the US and Europe, there are huge differences, lots and lots of challenges. I know it was very, very short. But I did want to offer the opportunity in the last couple of minutes that we have. Does anyone have any questions? Or is there anyone that's actually trying to deal with these situations right now that can share something with us as well?
I think they're all hungry.
Not everyone at the same time.
No. I know that is Chris still with us? Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you're dealing with this. I know I'm going to put you on the spot now, sorry. So have you got something that you can share, you know, something that you've already come across and stumbled and been, you know, caught by surprise?
The one thing that we were caught by surprise was that we were told that we have to have a handbook for the US. And specifically just for the US. Nothing to do with the one that we have in the UK, with Malta, just for them. What's your intake on that?
Were you
surprised.
told what needed to be in it, or just that it needed to be a handbook?
We actually have a lawyer in the US as well, so
Did
that
you get
was
a quote?
easier.
Obviously.
But the only problem we find is every state has his own thing, you know?
Yes.
So we're in Georgia state. So then going deep down in Atlanta and everything, so that's even worse.
And do you have all of your people based in Georgia? Or are there others that are remote as well that you have to try and cover other states too?
They want them forced to be working in the office.
Okay.
So
So Chris will be happy with that.
he is about that, yes. And the disadvantage is that we're competing with the biggest companies that there are across. So to poach somebody and they leave the next day, that's the biggest issue.
Okay, so you are seeing some of the issues that then Lewis was talking about in terms of the retention already with setting that up.
50%.
Wow, okay. So the handbook piece, did anyone want to comment?
What I want to maybe say about, and this I'm being serious, legal fees. Because they could vary a lot between countries and even the type of law firms you use.
But no worries, in the US they're all expensive.
I'm sure they are. Well, Malta, believe me, it's not exactly cheap. But what I would suggest to you is, personally, I'm sure you do it, but in Malta, we don't really have that culture all the time. Sometimes we don't give an estimate of fees. We just do the work and then just send the bill. Always get an estimate of fees. And perhaps you'd need to shop around. And I don't only mean shop around in terms of fees. You have to shop around in terms of connection. If you and your lawyer, I know I'm of a particular style, and I know not everyone likes how I work, and it's fine. But I want my clients. No, I'm honest, it's true. But there are then my own clients, they love me. And it's important there is that chemistry with your lawyer, because we're dealing with human beings at the moment. Your role is you dealing with people who you might be sacking, you know, who you might be recruiting, who you might be dealing with harassment cases. And if your lawyer isn't getting you, or worse still, not getting your culture, you have a problem. So my suggestion to you, have that first meeting, see how the chemistry is. Because more than the fees, I think that is even more important. The style of your lawyer and how you work is crucial. Okay?
But make the meeting short, because lawyers in the US, they charge by hour, so...
Even here, exactly. Exactly.
So then we need to come back to the quick, how are you?
Don't ask how they're doing and how their love life is. Just get to the thing.
Excellent. We're out of time. Thank you very much to the panellists. Thanks, Chris. Sorry to put you on the spot over there, but thanks for contributing that bit. And good luck to anyone that is actually working with or starting to work with the US and Canada as well.